Hi guys, so in today's tutorial we're going to be talking about embedded databases. We're going to be talking about the likes of H2 or Derby database. So typically most applications are going to reference some kind of data source, be it a JDBC database, DB2 database, any kind of database there is, Oracle, Sybase, etc, etc. But when you're running your tests and you create your test for your application, you don't want to actually call it to the real database. You don't want to make that network call. Well, in most cases. So what we can do in Spring is actually substitute that database. So instead of calling it to the real database, we can create an embedded database. So that's going to be in memory during our test. So before our test runs, we create this database. We're then going to load it with some data that's going to enable our test to run. Our test will then run against this embedded database. And once the test stops or finishes, we then shut down the database. So that's known as tear down. So we can do this with H2, we can do it with Derby. It's a really, really great way of testing your application's functionality while actually using a real database. But again, it's an in-memory database or a embedded database and not calling across the network. So I hope you enjoy this video, and big props to the Spring guys for creating nice libraries to wrap these, making it very easy for us programmers to write some really, really great tests. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Okay, so I'm just going to walk over an application I just put together, and what I'm going to show you is how I have an account service, and that calls an account DAO, and that in turn goes ahead and talks to a MySQL database. But what I really want to show you is how I created some tests for that account service, and instead of calling out the MySQL, it actually calls out an in-memory H2 database, which we stand up in our tests. And I'm going to show you how you do that with Spring 1.4 onwards. So I'm going to just walk you through the application I put together. It's a standard SpringBoot application. And the first thing I have is an account service implementation. And inside the service, I have injected in an account DAO. So in Spring 1.4, I don't need the auto wired anymore. It's going to automatically inject this in for me. And then what I have is a process method, which goes ahead and calls account DAO.insert. So we try and insert the account DTO into the account DAO. So inside the account DAO, what I have is a named parameter JDBC template. And again, I inject that into my account DAO. And all I do is insert into account table the name and the value of name. So that's the name of the variable inside my account DTO. So the test I want to create is when the account service is called and we pass in an account DTO, I want to make sure that that account service actually goes and inserts into the account DAO. So if someone came in the future and maybe commented out that line, check that in, or maybe introduced a bug and it wasn't inserted right, I want to be able to at least try and flag that up with my JUnit test before it makes it into the other environments. So what I did was go ahead, I went and created a package called ConfLib Start Embedded Service, so the same package name. I created the account service implementation class and appended test on the end. And then this is a bit different than the Spring 1.3. So what I have is Spring Runner. So that's more easy on the eye to use with the older version, which would be Spring JUnit 4 Class Runner. And of course, what I also have here is a SpringBoot test, so it's a new annotation as well. So if we go in there, have a look and see what it's doing. So because we have test classes that run SpringBoot based tests. So it's basically going to go ahead and bootstrap with SpringBoot support. And we get the option to actually set the web environment if we want with a port, or if a random port, and a bunch of other good things. So basically it's going to start up our SpringBoot application. And what I'm doing, the first thing I do before I write my test is I want to actually use an H2 database instead of or a Derby database instead of the MySQL database. So in your POM, what I did was I brought in H2, and in H2 I added the scope test, and SpringBoot's going to automatically go ahead and see that that's in test scope and create a data source for us. And I also set the MySQL connector to runtime. So now we can inject a JDBC template in here, which is going to be managed or backed by a H2 data source. And what I say is before each test runs, I want to execute the create account DDL script. So I'm using the script utilities from Spring Framework, and that allows me to basically insert my DDL or my SQL into the database before it runs. So I go ahead and create the account table. So I have a name, an account ID, and a version, and let's set the auto increment in 0. And I also have a drop SQL. So that's going to drop the table after the test. So now in between each test, we basically go ahead and create the table, and then we tear down and drop the table. So now for the actual test, what I wanted to do was say the account service. So I auto wire that in because again we've got a Spring Boot test here. We're going to say the account service saves the account DTO into the account table, and now the account table contains one row with name equal to Philip. So I tried to be descriptive there in my test. So the account DTO, I'm going to set that to Philip. I then run this first. You don't always have to, but I just do this just in case maybe someone makes a mistake in the account T SQL and maybe inserts a row. You never know what someone's going to do. So I count the rows in the table where the account T is the table, and we put a where clause here. So the name column is equal to Philip. So that should return 0 before we execute or call this method. So then we call the method. It then goes ahead. And then we call to the table again and say, okay, there should be one row in here where my name is Philip, because that's what we're passing in. And that should return true. So if we go ahead and run that class, we should see, of course, my test passing, I've just created it. But if I debug the class, I want to show you that it's actually using H2 and not MySQL. So if I debug this, I'm going to run through it. And inside here, you see that I can go ahead and debug and grab the JDBC data source. And if I scroll in here, I should see the JDBC connection is the H2 memory database. So that's really great. So it's a really great way of actually testing your Java classes, testing and using an in-memory embedded database. And I absolutely love the new annotations that Spring Boot 1.4 has provided. I'm using them heavily in my real job and at home in my projects I do for fun and these tutorials. So I hope you learned something new today, and I hope that you can make use of this in your actual application and start delivering quality tests from the get-go, and maybe even introduce test-driven development style or behavior-driven development. So thank you for watching, and I will speak to you next time.